Welcome to the Commonwealth Matters. I'm your host, Richard Nelson, and as we are just weeks away from a celebration of America's 250th birthday, I'd like us to take some time to reflect on Christian ideals and the Christian worldview that helped to shape our founding. We're also going to talk about patriotism. Can Christians be patriots? Is that biblically allowed? And joining us to talk further about this is the second week that we've had him here, is Dr. John Wilsey. His recent book, God and Country, Upholding Faith, History, and National Identity, is very fitting for this moment. John, welcome to the Commonwealth Matters.
Thank you very much.
We did the program last week and we ran out of time talking about patriotism, and I'm fascinated with this idea. Especially in the last several years, there has been a criticism, a harsh criticism, for those who have a biblical worldview and who are living it out and take certain biblical ideals into the public arena. They're branded Christian nationalists. And we've done a program on that before.
Yep.
We both agree that there are different definitions for Christian nationalism. But in the broadest terms, it's what I just said, that it's those Christians who have a biblically informed worldview and they step into the public arena to debate for or against something. And yet you wrote a book that talks about upholding faith, history, and national identity. Let's talk about a healthy patriotism. Is patriotism, this is the first question, is a healthy patriotism, is it just another word for Christian nationalism?
No, I think you would distinguish between the two. Patriotism refers to a well-ordered love of country, and nationalism, Christian nationalism in particular, I think is indicative of a disordered love for country.
Okay. And
now, I would say that things are ambiguous because Christian nationalism is this loaded term.
Yeah.
And it's employed by people on the left to attack people like us.
Yeah.
And it's also employed by people on the far right, people even right to us, who would advocate that we would have a monarchy. So it's confusing to people. And I say to people often that, when they ask me, what is Christian national? What does it actually mean? And I tell them that there isn't one definition. It's such a loaded term that it's not even helpful to use. So I just try not to even use it. Instead, I try to focus on what we should aspire to.
Yeah.
And that is a rightly ordered patriotism.
And things that we should aspire to as we celebrate our nation's 250th birthday. We think of the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
That's what we're celebrating. And then 11 years later, the U.S. Constitution came into being, which is a masterful document.
Yep.
The most, you're the historian, but is it not the longest constitution under which any nation has endured?
It has. Yeah.
So that's a miracle in itself. And there are principles in that Constitution that have been the genius of our success, that we don't have a monarchy.
Nope.
We have three separate but co-equal branches of our federal government, right? The executive, the judicial, the legislative. We have this idea of federalism, where you have different levels of government. The federal government that is charged to take care of certain things. You've got state governments and then local governments. You got this idea of individual rights, right, that are sacrosanct in this country. The freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, which were not recognized really before the founding of this country. So we have this incredible ideas that came into being in our founding, both in the Declaration of Independence and in the U.S. Constitution. There are many who say God had his hand in our history, the formation of our history. And we can look at certain things and maybe make a case for that. But John, I want to get your input on the Christian worldview and the influence that Christians in particular had both in the creation of the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution. Did Christians have a significant impact?
Yes and yes. I mean, I would say definitely. There are a lot of various and disparate sources for revolutionary thought.
Yeah.
But Protestant Christianity is among the primary ones. So there's two ways you can ask this question.
Yeah.
You can say, was America founded as a Christian nation? And you can ask, did America have a Christian founding?
Yeah.
To the first question, was America founded as a Christian nation? I would say no, it
Yeah.
wasn't. We have a disestablished system in our federal government and in our state governments. But did America have a Christian founding? I think the answer is most definitely yes.
Tell us why. So what are some of the things that would support what you're saying? And I
Well,
agree, by the way, that we are not a Christian nation
right,
because Christianity is not the official religion. We're
right,
not forced to worship there.
right.
We have freedom of religion.
We have freedom of religion. Now, let's talk about that idea of religious freedom. Religious freedom, of course, is the first of the five in the First Amendment. We could call it the first freedom. And so Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion
Yeah.
or inhibiting the free exercise thereof,
Yeah.
is the wording. From there, you have freedom of speech, you have freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and freedom to petition the government. Religious freedom is a Christian idea. It was an idea that was championed by Christians in the colonies. It was through long experience with persecution
Yeah.
that the idea of religious freedom emerged over here in North America. And religious freedom, I think, is one of the greatest ideas that Americans have had. Now, Americans weren't the first people to think about religious freedom, but the First Amendment is the first legal document guaranteeing religious freedom really since the Edict of Milan in 313.
Oh boy.
So in the modern world, the First Amendment is very significant because of that. Also, you mentioned a couple of things in walking through the Declaration of the Constitution.
Yeah.
Federalism,
Yeah.
federal separation of powers. Federalism is the idea that you establish institutions of government. They all have their distinct roles. They have their distinct jobs. But there's also recognition that each of those institutions is going to be jealous for its own prerogatives. Jealousy, we would say, is a bad thing. Jealousy is sinful. It leads to all kinds of bad things. And the founders had this genius application of federalism: is you take vice in the human heart, you take the fallen nature, which is inherent to humanity, but you channel it into a good direction. So the legislature will be jealous to guard its prerogatives against the incursions of the executive branch. But that prevents the concentration of power in the executive or the legislative or the judicial branch. So separation of powers is based upon a view of human nature that is fallen.
Yeah.
And that's a Christian principle.
If I could add, fallen human nature where the conglomeration of power is a dangerous thing. If you give power to one entity, one person, or one institution, it's very easy to be corrupted. If it's dispersed with, in this case, three separate institutions, there's checks and balances. This is one of our principles here.
Yeah.
But you're saying that this is coming from the principle that, hey, we're fallen human beings.
Yeah.
We should not trust one person or one institution with ultimate power.
For example, James Madison in Federalist 51, he diagnoses human nature as what's wrong with human nature is that we have a common lust for power.
Yeah.
We want power above all things. And federalism is meant to scatter power, not to concentrate it in one man or concentrate it in one institution, but to scatter it out, to divide it out so that no one institution or person can dominate the others and tyrannize the others. He learned those things from John Witherspoon, who was the president of college in New Jersey, what's Princeton University now. John Witherspoon signed the Declaration of Independence, signed the Constitution. He was an evangelical Christian. So Christianity is not the only source. Alan Gelzo, great historian, says he likens it to two cooks in the kitchen. One cook is Protestant Christianity. One cook is the British Enlightenment. The thing to remember is that the British Enlightenment was not anti-God. It wasn't anti-church. It wasn't anti-Christian, like it became on the continent, especially during the years leading up to the French Revolution and after. Our experience of the Revolution was much more mild, and it was much more focused on sort of Christian morality. Yes, it's true that Jefferson was not a Christian. Benjamin Franklin, when they were, I wouldn't say they were deists, but they denied the Trinity. They denied the dual nature of Christ. So they weren't Christians for that reason. But at the same time, they had a high regard and a high respect for the Bible. And the Bible between 1760 and 1804 is the most quoted source during the founding period
Wow.
in the founders' writings. And it's not close.
Yeah.
Um, but the Bible is one source among many other sources that are cited by the founding generation.
But it's the main source,
But
primary
it's the
source.
primary source.
John, I want to pivot over to patriotism. We talked about that in the last program, and the difference between being a patriot and a Christian nationalist, if you will. You made the provocative statement that you cannot be a good Christian without being a patriot.
That's right.
Explain that.
Yep.
So there's people listening and tuned in right now thinking, man, I don't know what even a patriot is. Explain your statement.
A patriot is someone who loves his country.
Okay.
You can't be a Christian if you don't love.
Yeah.
Now, you can always disorder your loves.
Yeah.
You can disorder your love for your family. You can disorder your love for your friends. You can, love the world. Apostle John says, don't love the world. But patriotism, at the heart of what patriotism is love. Patriotism is not understood without love. Love for your fellow citizens, love for your land, love for your institutions and your ideals, love for your people. When I say I'm a patriot, I love my country. My country consists of the land. My country consists of its people. My country consists of its heritage. I love these things. I don't love them more than God.
Yeah.
But as I love God and I'm devoted to God, I'm devoted to my neighbor. And patriotism is a form of neighbor love. You can't be a Christian if you're not a patriot.
So, John, does this just apply to the United States? We're blessed with incredible freedom, incredible opportunity. We've got Christian ideals that have worked their way into our institutions, including our governing documents, as we're talking about. But what about the Christian who was in ancient Rome? Or what about the Christian who was in more recent times, a Christian under the Third Reich in Nazi Germany? Now, they were real people under other regimes. Should they have been patriotic? Let's go with Rome.
Rome is a little bit different. Rome was an empire.
Okay.
Rome isn't a nation state, so it's not a one-to-one comparison. So let's say that you were, a native of the province of Galatia in Asia Minor. Your love for your people would be expressed in various ways, but your love for Rome and for the empire would be expressed in a different way than say we would express it. I'm from Georgia, you're from Wisconsin. It's just not the same thing. It's not a one-to-one comparison. Now, the Third Reich, someone like a Dietrich Bonhoeffer acted patriotically in wanting to speak prophetically against the Third Reich and also seek to bring an end to that regime, because that regime was evil.
Yeah.
So being a patriot doesn't mean that you don't criticize, that you're not critical of your government.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is a difference between the government and the country.
That's a good distinction. But yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's a really important distinction.
As a patriot, and especially as a Christian patriot, we have a duty to speak prophetically to our government.
Yeah, that's good. Let's look at some biblical cautions, if any, regarding American patriotism. We talked about disordered loves. If you love your country more than God, that's a disordered love. I want to give some real examples that some people in the church are dealing with today. So what about in the context of church leaders considering putting the American flag on the podium, maybe next to the pulpit? Is that, because here we got the idea of patriotism, love of country. And I think historically that this happened during the Cold War when people in the pews, churches, would put the American flag on the platform. Is that appropriate? Is that blurring the lines between orthodoxy and ordered love? Maybe we'll just do it that way, putting the flag up there next to the pulpit. To speak to that, if you could.
My views on this have changed over time. I used to be, against that.
Yeah.
That practice dates back to the Civil War, and it really got going during World War I. But I've moderated my position on that. I think it is really the choice of the individual congregation.
Yeah.
But let's say that a congregation decides to put a flag up on the dais in a church. I was on staff at a church where we did that. We had the American flag up on there. What does the flag represent? Well, it represents, again, our country. It represents our heritage, our ideals. It represents our people. It represents our land. None of those things are necessarily contrary to the Christian faith. In fact, Christianity is a major source of those ideals and who we are as a people. It's not the only one, but it's a very important source. So it's not wrong, I don't think, to have the American flag displayed. I think that there are things that you can do as a church that are inappropriate, pledging the flag on Sunday morning.
Okay.
I don't think that that's right. It distracts from the reason why we're there on a Sunday morning. We're there to worship the triune God.
Yeah.
We can give thanks for our country. We can pray for our leaders. We're commanded to do that. But there are things that you can do, I think, that distract from the purpose of why you're there in a church. But I don't think that the presence of an American flag detracts from that necessarily. It doesn't necessarily do so. Now, I'd say if you had a swastika, I think that would be inappropriate.
And that was a real thing for German churches.
Yeah, because what does that represent?
Yeah.
It represents godless ideas. If you had a rainbow flag, I think that would be totally inappropriate. And it's a little ironic that lefty people in churches say you shouldn't have the American flag, but they sure do have gay flags and transsexual flags and BLM flags flying. Those things are totally contrary to the gospel. So that's inappropriate. I think it does matter what you publicly affirm in the form of symbols like flags. Very important.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's necessarily the case that the stars and stripes represent an affront to God. I don't think that's right. And so if a congregation decides not to, I'm an elder at our church now, and we don't have a flag up on it. And I think it's fine. But if a church decides to have a U.S. flag up there, I guess that's fine too.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. I want to talk about some public symbols of God and whether or not it's blurring the line between church and state, if you will, or unhealthy or unbiblical, bringing God into the public arena. So if you're to pull out your billfold and pull out $1, you'll see "In God We Trust." It's on all of our currency. Is that appropriate?
Sure.
Is that something?
Yeah, totally appropriate. It's fine. I don't understand people who say that it's not appropriate.
Yeah.
Why?
They're saying it's imposing a religion. It's establishing
not establishing a religion. It's not, I'm not being coerced. My faith is not being coerced. My belief is not being coerced. My behavior is not being coerced at all. So especially from the secular left, who they're the ones that usually make those arguments. They're specious arguments. They have the ring of truth to them, but they have no substance to them. They are only sentimental arguments. The idea that saying "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance is offensive.
Yeah.
Again, it has a ring of truth to it, but it's meaningless. It's completely absurd. Here's an example of how this might work. I believe that homosexuality is an immoral lifestyle, but I'm not going to stop using the word gay. I'm not going to say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to ever say that word because it's offensive." That's a dumb thing to say. It's an absurd thing to say. Gay is a word that's used in our culture to describe homosexuality. So if I'm going to refer to it, I'm going to refer to it in lots of different contexts. I'm going to use the word. God is another word. God is a term that we use to describe the transcendent being. And if you're a Jewish person or a Muslim or a Christian, or even if you're a secular atheist, you know what God means. It's just a part of our language, and language means they're symbols. They refer to actual entities. And to say that this word is offensive is simply absurd. So no, it's on that score, it's not wrong, and it's also part of our heritage. We as Americans have always been a devoted, religiously minded people.
Yeah.
Not everybody's been Christians. I'm not saying we're a Christian nation, but I am saying that Christianity and that faith and religion has always been held up in very, very high regard, and evidenced by First Amendment. Religious freedom is the first freedom. So we could go on and on about
If
that.
I could add just two other points about this, but God is acknowledged in our Declaration of Independence as a giver of our rights.
Yeah.
We're endowed by our
Absolutely.
Creator with certain inalienable rights.
Yeah.
In the Kentucky Constitution, we acknowledge God in the preamble.
Right.
We, the people of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, grateful to Almighty God for the civil, political
Love it.
and religious liberties we enjoy,
Mm.
and invoking the continuance of these blessings. That's like a prayer, right?
Yes.
Do ordain and establish this Constitution. So
Mhm.
this is part of our history as a people. And so to acknowledge God on our currency is appropriate. It's in line with our historical documents,
Yep.
political documents. The pledge, again, one nation under God, it's just reflecting a historical political truth that's there. I want to move on to another area that's controversial. There are movements across the country to post the Ten Commandments in public places and particularly in public schools. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's not establishing a religion.
No.
Okay.
If I kill somebody and go to jail for it, is that an establishment of religion because I violated the sixth commandment?
Yeah. No.
No, no. These are all absurd notions that posting the Ten Commandments establishes a religion. What religion does it establish? Does it establish Judaism? Does it establish Christianity? Does it establish Protestantism? Does it establish Islam? Which religion is this that we're establishing?
Yeah.
So no, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's not a marker of establishment of religion. What it is an acknowledgement of a couple of things. One, that morality is objective.
Yeah.
And two, it's an acknowledgement of our American tradition that we as Americans have always held the Ten Commandments in very, very high regard.
Yeah.
And all of our laws are based upon them.
John, you'll be happy to hear if you've not heard of this before, but the Kentucky legislature took a granite monument that was removed from the Capitol grounds and sent to far west Kentucky. It was taken out of, removed from there and put back onto the Capitol grounds just the other month.
Yeah.
So this is something that has been part of our state history.
Yeah.
We've acknowledged the Ten Commandments in public places. John, we're running out of time, but I want to move to another topic here. How do we as Christians responsibly express our faith in the public arena and our patriotism in the public arena? Let me restate that. How can we express a healthy patriotism as Christians? Healthy patriotism, and I'll add good citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to do that, or can you give us examples of what that looks like?
Yeah, I think we try to make these things very complicated. I would say if you love your country and you have a well ordered love of country because you're a Christian, just be yourself. If you're thankful for your country, be proud about it. Talk about it. Talk about how grateful you are.
Yeah.
You know, I just finished rereading a wonderful book that came out as back in the early 90s. It was made a movie called We Were Soldiers. It's about the 7th Cavalry's engagement with the Vietnamese in 1965.
Mm.
I recommend every American read that book, not just watch the movie, read the book. We Were Soldiers, Once and Young. I've read it 3 times. I get to the end of it and I find myself weeping at the end of it
Mm-hmm.
because of the sacrifice that those young men gave. I'm weeping at the end of it because the end tells the story of the wives and the children that were left behind by the dead.
Mm.
And the little boys and girls who were babies when their fathers were killed in the battlefields in Vietnam, who came up and grew up without their father. And they talked about their lives and what they missed out on. It's those men gave a sacrifice that none of us can imagine. And they did it for their country. That's not anti-Christian.
Yeah.
And if you're thankful for those kinds of things, be yourself.
Yeah.
And don't be ashamed to acknowledge your love for your country. That kind of fear and hesitation to say that you love your country and that you're a patriot is imposed on us from thankless and godless sources.
Look, John, it's in vogue to renounce citizenship. You're seeing major celebrities say, I can't stand the country, I'm leaving. Richard Gere's in the news lately about criticizing, and several celebrities want to leave, but I would argue that they do not understand what we have. They might disagree with the current administration, but they do not understand the gift that we have in this country. If I could go back to what you were just saying about a practical way to show patriotism and good citizenship, it's serving in the armed forces.
Yeah.
That's one way that many people have done it, and they've given more than any of us
That's right.
talking right now have ever given. John, I want to end on this one You talk about, or you've talked about, the distinction between peaceable assembly and radical protest. That's a hot topic right now, where you've had violent protests, especially after the George Floyd murder. Can you distinguish? And again, this is a First Amendment freedom, peaceable, the right to peaceably assemble, and then there's radical protests. How do you distinguish between the 2?
Mm-hmm. The First Amendment defines what protests ought to look like.
Yeah.
Violent protests, unlawful protests are illegal. They're disorderly. It's a joke among us today, mostly peaceful protests. It's a joke because it's kind of gallows humor.
Yeah.
Because it's absurd. There's no such thing as a mostly peaceful protest. A mostly peaceful protest is a violent protest.
Yeah.
It's illegal.
Yeah.
It goes against our traditions. It goes against our Constitution. That's an easy one.
Yeah, and that's something that we're seeing it with ICE raids of illegal immigrants. It's important to get that right. If we do not steward the freedoms that were given in the First Amendment, there are consequences to that.
Yeah.
If we don't responsibly exercise those First Amendment freedoms, they're in jeopardy, I would argue. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And if we want to change the laws, we live under a system in which laws can be changed. They can be changed. If we don't like ICE, we can get rid of it.
And that ties into the last question I want to ask. And I feel like we could go on and do another program, but we're going to have to bring this to an end here. And you did touch on this a little bit earlier, but the duty of patriots. What is their duty when they disagree with their government? And when you talk about duty, you're talking about a responsibility, an obligation,
Yes.
something they're required to do. So let's say the American government is doing something wrong. What does patriotic duty look like?
Well, it would depend on the situation, but let's say that there's a Christian school that's being persecuted by the government in some way. We have processes where we can, take the government to court. You and I can take the government to court. That's a stunning reality in America. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
When the government is doing something that it shouldn't be doing, we can speak prophetically. We have the freedom to speak. We have the freedom to get behind our pulpits on Sunday morning and preach and hold the government to account without fear of being arrested and thrown in jail. And when the government is doing active things that are unconstitutional or that are trampling upon our religious freedom, we can take the government to court and we can win. And see our freedoms being applied in constitutional ways that are consistent with our traditions, and see truth prevail. And that is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. That's one of the freedoms that we have as Americans that many other nations don't have.
That's right.
The book is called God and Country, Upholding Faith, History, and National Identity. John Wilsey, thank you for writing that book, and thank you for joining us on The Commonwealth Matters. May God bless you, my friend.
Thank you, sir.